The alarm sirens screamed across Valerian Prime as the first explosions lit up the morning sky. Ambassador Kelnar ran through the government building's corridors, his heart pounding in his chest. Through the windows, he could see fires spreading across the capital city. The Korthax ships hung in orbit like dark metal birds raining death from above. How many ships? Kelnar gasped as he burst into the command center. 30 warships, Ambassador, his aide Senna replied, her voice shaking. Our defense fleet lasted less than an hour. They're gone. All of them. Kelnar felt his legs go weak. The Valari were traders and diplomats, not warriors. Their small defense force had been meant to stop pirates, not fight a real war. The Korthax Dominion had come without warning, without even a declaration of war. They simply arrived and started shooting. On the main screen, War Master Thrace's face appeared. The Korthax commander looked pleased with himself. People of Valerian Prime, your world now belongs to the Korthax Dominion. Surrender immediately, or we will destroy your cities one by one. You have 24 hours to comply. The transmission ended. Kelnar looked around the room at the frightened faces of his people. They were doomed unless help came quickly. Send distress calls to all our allies, Kelnar ordered. Everyone. Anyone who will listen. For the next 6 hours, Senna sent emergency messages across the galaxy. The responses came back slowly, and each one broke Kelnar's heart a little more. The Talaxian government replied first. We sympathize with your situation, but our military is currently engaged elsewhere. We can offer humanitarian supplies after the crisis concludes. The Heminor Collective sent a similar message. Our hearts go out to the Valari people. Unfortunately, we cannot commit military forces at this time. We will bring your situation before the Galactic Council. One after another, the replies came in. Sympathy, regrets, empty promises. Nobody wanted to risk their own ships fighting the Korthax. The galaxy, it seemed, was happy to watch Valerian Prime burn rather than stand up to a real threat. In desperation, Kelnar turned to humanity. The humans were newcomers to galactic politics, only 70 years since first contact. Most species still saw them as young and untested. But the Valari had traded with Earth's colonies and found humans to be honest partners. Kelnar composed a simple message. We require immediate military assistance. Our world is under siege. Any aid you can provide would be appreciated. He sent it and waited. He didn't expect much. If the older, more powerful species wouldn't help, why would the humans risk themselves for one small trading partner? The message reached Admiral Helen Grant aboard the UNS Valiant 3 hours later. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen combat before. She read the distress call twice, then immediately contacted Fleet Command on Earth. The response came faster than she expected. Admiral Grant read her orders and felt a grim smile cross her face. Earth wasn't sending thoughts and prayers. They were sending a message. Communications, patch me through to Vice Admiral Hendricks and Rear Admiral Hughes, Grant ordered. Tell them to prepare their battle groups for immediate deployment. Full combat readiness. Her tactical officer looked up from his console. Admiral, how many ships are we deploying? All of them, Grant replied. 3rd, 7th, and 9th battle groups. Every ship we've got in this sector. The officer's eyes went wide. Ma'am, that's over 200 vessels. I can count, Lieutenant. Send the orders. Within hours, the largest human fleet ever assembled began moving toward Valerian Prime. 3 battle groups combined into one massive armada. Carriers, battlecruisers, destroyers, frigates, and 3 enormous dreadnoughts that could crack planets if needed. The fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed, racing across the stars. Captain Lisa Morgan stood on the bridge of her destroyer, the UNS Raptor. She briefed her crew as they traveled. Listen up. We've got a peaceful species getting stomped by bullies. Intel says they're expecting maybe a couple of ships if they're lucky. They're going to get a whole lot more than that. Her crew cheered. This was what they'd trained for. Not conquest, but protection. Standing between predators and their prey. Back on Valerian Prime, the situation got worse by the hour. Korthax soldiers landed in the cities. They set up checkpoints and rounded up civilians. War Master Thrace gave another broadcast, this time showing footage of his troops executing Valari resistance fighters. Your time is running out, Thrace announced. Surrender now, or tomorrow we begin bombing your population centers. Ambassador Kelnar sat in his underground bunker with the remaining Valari leadership. They had heard nothing from the humans. 3 days had passed since the invasion began. Hope was dying. "We have to surrender," one council member said. "We can't let our people be slaughtered." "Give it one more day," Senna pleaded. "The humans might still come." Kelnar shook his head sadly. "The humans are probably too far away, or too wise to risk their ships. We're alone." He prepared to record the surrender message. That would end Valerian Prime's independence. Forever. Then every sensor on the planet went crazy. Jump signatures appeared at the edge of the solar system. Not one or two, but dozens. Then hundreds. The sensor technician stared at his screens in disbelief. "Ambassador, you need to see this." Kelnar rushed to the display. His mouth fell open. The largest fleet he had ever seen was dropping out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. Ship after ship appeared until the darkness of space was filled with human vessels. Aboard the Korthax flagship, War Master Thrace was equally shocked. "How many?" he demanded. 217 confirmed, War Master," his tactical officer reported. "Multiple capital ships, 3 Dreadnought-class vessels. Thrace had 30 ships. The humans had brought 7 times that number." For the first time in his long military career, he felt genuine fear. A voice crackled over every communication channel in the system. Admiral Grant spoke calmly, like she was discussing the weather rather than threatening a war. "This is Admiral Helen Grant of the United Nations Space Command to all Korthax forces. You have invaded a sovereign world without cause. You are in violation of Galactic Council law. You have exactly 1 hour to withdraw all forces and leave this system. This is your only warning." Thrace's pride wouldn't let him back down. He'd conquered 50 worlds. He wouldn't be intimidated by humans, no matter how many ships they brought. They were bluffing. They had to be. "Humanity should not involve itself in matters beyond its understanding," Thrace replied. "This world belongs to the Korthax now. Leave or we will fire upon you." There was a long pause. Then Grant's voice came back, colder now with an edge like a knife. "War Master Thrace, you were warned. We don't send aid. We send solutions." Grant turned to her tactical officer. "Broadcast to all ships. Weapons free. Target all hostile vessels. Nothing gets away." The human fleet split into 3 groups and began to move. They didn't rush. They advanced with the confidence of a force that knew it had already won. Thrace realized his mistake too late. He had thought this was a negotiation. It wasn't, it was an execution. "All ships evasive maneuvers," he shouted. "Return fire." The Battle of Valerian Prime lasted 18 minutes. The Korthax ships tried to fight, but they were hopelessly outmatched. Human destroyers swarmed like wolves, fast and deadly. Battlecruisers fired from long range with devastating accuracy. The 3 dreadnoughts didn't even need to shoot. Their mere presence was enough to break Korthax morale. Captain Morgan led her squadron against Thrace's flagship. They hit it from 6 different angles, overwhelming its shields in minutes. When the shields fell, a human battlecruiser finished it with a single concentrated beam that cut the massive ship in half. War Master Thrace died without ever understanding what had happened. He had expected a negotiation. Humans didn't negotiate with people who murdered civilians. 3 Korthax ships managed to escape by jumping to faster-than-light speed. The rest were destroyed or disabled. Not a single human ship took serious damage. On Valerian Prime, Ambassador Kelnar watched the battle through sensors, barely able to believe what he was seeing. The fleet that had terrorized his world for 3 days was simply gone, swept away in less than 20 minutes. Grant's voice came through again. "Korthax ground forces, this is your final warning. Lay down your weapons immediately. Human Marines are landing. Resistance is futile." 5,000 human Marines in powered armor dropped from orbit in small pods. They hit the ground like meteors and immediately engaged the Korthax soldiers. The fighting was brief and one-sided. Within 2 days, every Korthax soldier on Valerian Prime had either surrendered or been killed. When it was finally over, Kelnar emerged from his bunker into a city still smoking from battle but blessedly free. Human troops patrolled the streets, helping Valari civilians and treating wounded. The nightmare was over. Admiral Grant came down to the planet's surface to meet with Kelnar. She arrived without fanfare, just a professional officer doing her job. "Admiral," Kelnar said, his voice thick with emotion, "we asked for aid. We hoped for maybe a few ships. You brought an entire fleet. You saved our civilization." Grant nodded simply. "You were attacked. You called for help. We answered. That's what allies do." Kelnar struggled to understand. But this fleet must represent a huge portion of your military. Grant allowed herself a small smile. Admiral Helen Grant stood on the bridge of the UNS Valiant as her reduced fleet traveled toward Concordia Station. She had left most of her ships at Valerian Prime to help with rebuilding and security. Now she was bringing 15 vessels to face something potentially more dangerous than the Korthax fleet: galactic politics. Ambassador Claire Bennett joined her on the bridge. Bennett was Earth's chief representative to the Galactic Council, a woman who had spent 15 years navigating the complex web of alien diplomacy. She carried a datapad filled with reports and looked tired. "How bad is it?" Grant asked. Bennett sighed. "Mixed. The Valari are singing our praises. About 20 other species are quietly grateful. But the Korthax have allies, and they're pushing a narrative that we're dangerous warmongers. Several species are demanding we explain why we brought such overwhelming force." Captain Lisa Morgan, who had been promoted to join the delegation, shook her head in disbelief. "We saved an entire civilization." "How is that controversial?" "Because we did it efficiently," Bennett explained. "Most galactic conflicts drag on for months with negotiations, sanctions, and small skirmishes. Nobody actually wins decisively anymore. We disrupted that comfortable pattern. Now people are scared of what else we might do with all those ships." Grant crossed her arms. "We responded to a distress call from an ally. If the Council has a problem with that, they can explain why they all sat on their hands while the Valari were being slaughtered." The journey to Concordia Station took 5 days. When they arrived, the reception was exactly as mixed as Bennett had predicted. Some species sent welcoming committees. Others remained coldly formal. A few openly hostile groups held protests outside the diplomatic zones, waving signs calling humans aggressive and dangerous. Ambassador Bennett met privately with several key figures before the formal session. Ambassador Kelnar arrived from Valerian Prime and promised his full support. "We will tell the truth," he said firmly. "You saved us when no one else would. That's not up for debate." Bennett also spoke with Ambassador Terex from the Hegemony Coalition, a powerful economic alliance. Terex was sympathetic but cautious. "Your actions were legally justified," he admitted. "But you frightened a lot of people. You need to explain yourselves carefully or this could go badly." The opposition was led by Ambassador Sheris of the Zelkari Compact. She gave inflammatory interviews to anyone who would listen. "Humanity deployed enough military force to conquer a dozen worlds," she declared. "They claim it was a rescue, but what's stopping them from using that fleet for aggression next time?" The emergency council session opened in the Grand Chamber, a massive amphitheater that could hold thousands. High Arbiter Nexal, an ancient being from one of the galaxy's founding species, presided over everything with calm authority. Ambassador Kelnar testified first. He described the Korthax invasion in painful detail, showing footage of the bombardment and the executions. His voice broke as he explained how his people had been abandoned. "We sent distress calls to every ally we had," Kelnar said. "Most sent their condolences and promised humanitarian aid after we lost. A few sent diplomatic protests that the Korthax ignored completely. Only humanity answered with real help." He pulled up tactical displays showing the human fleet's arrival and the swift battle that followed. "They brought overwhelming power, yes. But because they did, the fighting was brief. Civilian casualties were minimal. If the battle had dragged on for weeks, millions of my people would have died." The chamber filled with murmurs. Some species applauded. Others remained silent, calculating their political positions. Ambassador Sheris took the floor for the opposition. She displayed her own analysis comparing the size of the human and Korthax fleets with dramatic graphics. "The Valari are understandably grateful," Sheris said, "but gratitude doesn't change the facts. Humanity deployed over 200 warships against a force of 30. A fleet 1/10 that size would have been sufficient. The only reason to bring such overwhelming force is intimidation. They wanted to scare the entire galaxy." Admiral Grant, watching from the human section, felt her jaw tighten. But this was Bennett's arena now. She had to trust the diplomat to handle it. Ambassador Bennett approached the central podium when her turn came. She was calm and methodical, presenting her arguments like a lawyer making a case. "High Arbiter, honored members, Ambassador Sheris is correct about one thing. Humanity did intend to send a message. The message was simple. When you attack our allies, there are consequences." Bennett activated a timeline showing galactic conflicts over the past 20 years. In this period, 14 independent worlds were conquered by larger powers. In every case, the Council issued condemnations. In every case, sanctions were discussed but rarely fully implemented. In every case, the aggressor faced minimal real consequences. She let the data speak for itself. The reason aggression has become common is because it's essentially risk-free. Diplomatic protests don't stop fleets. Sanctions don't protect civilians being bombed from orbit. The galaxy has created a system where attacking the weak costs almost nothing. Bennett switched to footage from Valerian Prime, showing Korthax soldiers executing civilians. Several council members looked away. This is what the Korthax were doing when we arrived. They weren't negotiating. They were murdering non-combatants. How many of you would have sacrificed your own ships in a prolonged battle to stop this? How many would have risked Korthax retaliation against your own worlds? The silence in the chamber was deafening. Bennett had struck directly at the truth everyone knew, but nobody wanted to say out loud. Humanity brought 200 ships for 3 reasons. Bennett continued. First, to ensure the liberation was swift and casualties were minimized. Second, to protect our own forces from unnecessary risk. Third, to send a clear message to anyone watching. Attacking our allies will result in overwhelming force and certain defeat. She looked directly at Sheris. You call this intimidation. We call it deterrence, and there's a significant difference between the two. High Arbiter Nexal called Admiral Grant to testify next. She approached in her dress uniform, every inch the professional military officer. Admiral Grant, the Arbiter began. Please describe your rules of engagement during the operation. Grant's response was crisp and clear. Our primary objective was liberation of Valerian Prime with minimal casualties. We were authorized to use all necessary force to achieve this objective while following all protocols. In the Galactic Accords, she displayed combat footage showing human ships accepting surrenders and providing medical aid to wounded Korthax personnel. We followed every rule of military engagement. We accepted surrenders when offered. We treated prisoners humanely. We targeted only military installations. Ambassador Sheris interrupted. But Admiral, bringing such overwhelming force made resistance pointless. You essentially bullied them into submission. Grant turned to face her directly. Ambassador, the Korthax invaded a peaceful world. They killed thousands of civilians. They threatened to bomb cities. When we offered them 1 hour to leave peacefully, their commander threatened to fire on us. They made their choice. She paused, letting her words sink in throughout the chamber. As for overwhelming force being bullying, I disagree completely. If we had arrived with a smaller fleet, the battle would have lasted days or weeks. More ships would have been destroyed on both sides. More of my people would have died. More Korthax personnel would have died. Most importantly, more Valari civilians caught in the fighting would have died. Grant's voice took on a harder edge. We brought enough force to end the conflict in 18 minutes. That's not bullying. That's efficiency. That's mercy if you actually look at the casualty numbers. Captain Morgan provided tactical testimony next, describing how human forces systematically disabled Korthax ships rather than destroying them outright. We could have annihilated their fleet in the opening moments, she explained. Our dreadnoughts alone had that capability. Instead, we gave their crews time to evacuate. We used precision strikes on ground installations. At every stage, we chose the option that minimized deaths. The Korthax sent their own representative, Ambassador Creven, a military officer trying to play diplomat. His testimony was defensive and angry. The humans deny the Korthax Dominion's legitimate territorial expansion, Creven argued. Valerian Prime was in disputed space. Our claim was valid under traditional conquest rights. Bennett immediately objected. Conquest rights were abolished by this council 300 years ago. The Dominion is trying to resurrect an archaic legal framework to justify naked aggression. High Arbiter Nexal agreed, and Creven's argument collapsed. He tried a different approach. Regardless, humanity's response was designed to humiliate us. They destroyed our fleet and imprisoned our soldiers. This is an act of war. Admiral Grant stood without waiting to be recognized. Ambassador Creven, your War Master fired on human vessels after being given opportunity to withdraw peacefully. That constitutes an act of war by the Korthax Dominion against humanity. We were remarkably restrained. We could have pursued your surviving ships. We could have retaliated against Korthax holdings throughout the sector. We did not. We stopped when Valerian Prime was free. The chamber erupted in debate.